The evening was quiet, except for the rhythmic clicking of my fingers against the keyboard. The soft glow of my computer screen was the only source of light in my home office, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the city of Boston hummed faintly in the background. The occasional distant honk, the subtle murmur of late-night pedestrians, and the ever-present whisper of the Charles River nearby. I had always found peace in my work. Numbers made sense, market trends were predictable, but lately, even the most intricate financial reports failed to distract me from the unease settling deep in my chest. Something was wrong. My name is Lucian Crosswell. I'm 37, a financial analyst, and until recently, a man who thought he had built a life of stability and love. I had a beautiful wife, Claire, whom I had been married to for 12 years, and two wonderful children, Lily and Ethan. For years I believed we were happy. Sure, there were ups and downs, but what marriage didn't have those? Yet, in the past few months, Claire had changed. The warmth in her voice when she greeted me had faded. The lingering glances we once shared over morning coffee had become fleeting, almost forced. At first, I dismissed it as stress. Claire worked in corporate marketing, an industry notorious for long hours and high-pressure deals. She started staying late at the office more often, excusing herself with explanations of last-minute campaigns or demanding clients. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't just the long hours. It was the way she avoided eye contact when she spoke to me. The way her phone was always face down on the table. The way she laughed, carefree and vibrant, when texting someone, a kind of joy that I hadn't seen in her when she was around me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe it was just a phase, that she was overwhelmed and would eventually come back to me. But reality doesn't bend to our desires, and reality had already begun to crack. One night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling while Claire slept beside me. The soft glow of the streetlights outside painted faint patterns on the walls. She was there, within arm's reach, yet I had never felt farther from her. She had come home late again. This time, past 11. She claimed she had stayed for drinks with her team. Maybe she had. Or maybe she hadn't. A few months ago, I wouldn't have doubted her. But now, every word she spoke felt rehearsed. Too calculated. Too convenient. The next morning, over breakfast, I watched her carefully. She was dressed immaculately, as always, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, her fitted blouse crisp against her slender frame. Claire had always been effortlessly elegant, a woman who turned heads without even trying. "Big day today?" I asked casually, sipping my coffee. She nodded, barely glancing up from her phone. "Yeah, huge client pitch. Might run late again." There it was, the casual excuse, the effortless dismissal. Something in my chest tightened. "Claire," I said, my tone softer this time. "Are you okay?" That made her pause. She finally looked up, her blue eyes meeting mine. There was something there. Hesitation, maybe guilt. "I'm fine, Lucian," she said with a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just work stress." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to push aside the gnawing doubt, but doubt, once planted, has a way of growing roots. The moment everything changed happened one evening when I arrived home earlier than usual. I had wrapped up my meetings ahead of schedule and decided to surprise Claire with dinner. A small, spontaneous gesture, something we used to do all the time before life became a series of obligations. I stepped through the front door and immediately noticed the silence. The kids were with my sister for the weekend, and Claire was supposed to be at home. Her coat was draped over the back of the couch, her purse on the counter. She was home. But where was she? I was about to call out her name when I heard it. A soft murmur. A voice. Coming from the living room. I moved quietly, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. "I miss you too." Claire's voice. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the corner just as she was lowering her phone from her ear, a small, almost shy smile still lingering on her lips. It was a look I hadn't seen in years, not when she looked at me at least. She startled when she saw me, her fingers tightening around the device as though I had caught her stealing. "Lucian," she said quickly, almost too quickly, "you're home early." I stared at her, trying to push past the roaring in my head. "Who were you talking to?" She blinked, then let out a small, controlled breath. "Nathan. He had some last-minute questions about the campaign tomorrow. It was nothing, really." She had never mentioned a Nathan before. Something in my gut twisted. I nodded slowly. "Right. Work stuff." Claire hesitated for a fraction of a second before returning the smile. "Yeah, just work." I didn't believe her, and that was the night I realized. My marriage wasn't just strained, it was broken. It was late. Claire was in the shower and her phone was left unattended on the nightstand. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. But that night, something pulled me toward it. I picked it up, and just as I did, a message lit up the screen. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Nathan." For a moment, the world around me blurred. The walls, the furniture, the quiet hum of the city outside. It all faded into a dull, distant murmur. I stared at the message, my fingers tightening around the device. My pulse pounded against my temples. I wanted to tell myself I was misreading it. That maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation. But some things don't need explanations. Some things are just undeniable. My wife was having an affair. I placed the phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I found it. Then I walked out of the bedroom and into my office, shutting the door behind me. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and exhaled a slow, steady breath. If Claire wanted to lie to me, betray me, tear apart everything we had built, then so be it. But I wasn't going to let her take my dignity. I wasn't going to let her blindside me in a divorce. If this marriage was ending, it would end on my terms. And so, that night, I made a decision. I would find out everything, and when the time came, I would make sure she faced the consequences. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of Claire's breathing beside me. My mind was racing, replaying every moment from the past few months, every excuse, every late-night meeting, every lingering glance at her phone. It all made sense now. The truth had been right in front of me, but I had refused to see it. Claire stirred slightly, shifting onto her side. If I had checked her phone an hour earlier, if I had confronted her immediately, would she be sleeping so soundly now? Would she be lying next to me, completely unaware that I knew? I turned onto my side, away from her. Confronting her now, in the middle of the night, would be reckless. I needed to be smart. I needed to be in control. I would find out everything. The next morning, I acted normal. I woke up, got dressed, kissed my kids goodbye, and left for work like it was any other day. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The first thing I did was reach out to a friend, Noah Pierce, a private investigator I had worked with before on financial fraud cases. Noah was in his early 40s, sharp, meticulous, and discreet. If there was something to be uncovered, he would find it. When I arrived at my office, I called him. "Noah, I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice steady. There was a pause. "Lucian, this doesn't sound like work." "It's not," I admitted. "It's personal." I heard him exhale. "Tell me what's going on." "I think Claire is having an affair," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I need proof. I need to know who, when, how long. Everything." Another pause. "You sure about this?" I found messages on her phone. Noah didn't ask any more questions. I'll start today. I'll be discreet. Thanks, I said. I need this done right. You got it, he said before hanging up. I sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the Boston skyline. This wasn't just about catching Claire in a lie. This was about making sure that when everything fell apart, and it would, I would be the one in control. That night, I arrived home as if nothing had changed. Claire was in the kitchen cooking dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, something she used to make when we were first married. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you're home early." I forced a smile back. "Yeah, slow day at work." I watched her carefully as she moved around the kitchen, humming to herself. For a brief moment, I wondered if she felt guilty, if she looked at me and saw the man she had promised to love forever. If she ever hesitated before sneaking around behind my back. Probably not. During dinner, she asked, "How was your day?" "Fine," I said, keeping my voice even. "Had a few meetings, nothing too exciting." "And the kids?" "They were great this morning," I said, glancing at Lily and Ethan, who were laughing about something at the table. Claire nodded, her smile easy, natural. She was good at this, pretending. I was better. Over the next few days, I kept up the act. I smiled, I laughed, I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. But inside, I was waiting for Noah's call. It came on the 4th day. "I have something," Noah said, his voice low. I swallowed hard. "Go on." "She's seeing someone. Regularly." Even though I had expected it, the confirmation still hit me like a punch to the gut. "Who?" I asked, gripping my desk. No surprises there. It's Nathan Wilkes. The name rang in my ears. Nathan. The man she had casually mentioned that night in the living room. The man who had sent the message. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. I had imagined different scenarios, different possibilities, but now, seeing his name in black and white, it was no longer just suspicion. It was real. "What do you have?" I asked. "Photos, hotel check-ins, a pattern. They meet at a boutique hotel on the other side of town. Always the same place, usually once or twice a week." I felt my jaw tighten. "Send me everything." "I'm sending them now," Noah said. "Lucian, I know this isn't easy, but at least now you know for sure." I exhaled slowly. "Yeah, now I know." When the email came through, I opened it immediately. The first few photos were of Claire and Nathan meeting in a parking lot, looking around before heading inside. Others showed them entering the hotel, Claire smiling at him in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. My stomach churned, but I kept my emotions in check. I scrolled further. More photos, dinners together, a weekend getaway. She had told me she was at a work retreat. Lies. My entire marriage was built on lies. I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. Then, I made a plan. I didn't confront Claire immediately. That would be too easy, too predictable. Instead, I started moving in the background. The first thing I did was meet with a divorce attorney. Olivia Hartman came highly recommended, one of the best in the city. As I sat in her office, she skimmed through the documents I had brought, flipping through the photos with a detached expression. "You have a strong case," she said finally. "Infidelity, financial stability on your side, and you've already started collecting evidence. Have you thought about custody?" "I want primary custody of my kids," I said firmly. She nodded. "That's likely, given the circumstances, but Claire may push for shared custody. She's been lying to me, sneaking around for months. If she wanted to be a good mother, she wouldn't have done this." Olivia studied me for a moment. "That argument will help, but we need to handle this carefully. You need to act like nothing has changed. Keep the evidence quiet until we file." I nodded. "I can do that." She leaned back. "You're taking this well." I let out a short laugh. "I'm not sure what taking it badly looks like." She gave me a knowing smile. Revenge. Some men try to ruin their wives publicly, others lash out. You're thinking long term. That's smart. This wasn't about revenge. This was about control. That night, Claire curled up next to me in bed, whispering, "I love you, Lucian." I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. "I love you too." She drifted off to sleep moments later, unaware that everything she thought she controlled was already slipping away. Claire had no idea. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, told me she loved me before bed, and carried on with her life as if everything was the same. But nothing was the same. I was no longer the oblivious husband she thought she had. Every word she spoke, every touch, every smile, it all felt rehearsed now, like a script she had perfected over time. I saw her for what she truly was, a woman living a double life, pretending to love me while she was sneaking off to be with him. And I let her pretend. Because while she was busy lying, I was preparing for the moment when the truth would finally crush her. I kept my routine normal. I went to work, spent time with my kids, and even planned a weekend trip for the family. Claire seemed pleased by that, thinking it was just another sign that I was the same old Lucian, blindly devoted, hopelessly trusting. I wasn't. Noah had continued gathering evidence, and by now we had a solid case. Hotel stays, secret dinners, financial records showing Claire had been using our joint account to fund her little escapades with Nathan. She was going to lose everything, and she had no idea. The night before our family trip, I sat alone in my office, reviewing the final pieces of the puzzle. The divorce papers were ready, the financial assets secured, the custody argument airtight. Olivia had assured me that Claire wouldn't stand a chance in court. I just needed to wait for the right moment. There was a knock on the door. Claire peeked inside, a soft smile on her lips. "Hey, you coming to bed?" I looked at her for a long moment, wondering how she could stand there so casually, knowing what she was doing behind my back. "In a bit," I said. She hesitated, then stepped inside. "You've been working late a lot lately," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "Everything okay?" I smiled, the same practiced, effortless smile I had perfected over the past few weeks. "Just some big projects at work. You know how it is." She nodded, reaching out to brush a hand against mine. "I'm really looking forward to this trip, Lucian. I feel like we need this." She was so good at this. If I didn't know any better, I might have believed her. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it lightly. "Me too." Lies. She leaned down and kissed me softly, and I kissed her back. Lies. Then she left, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. The next morning, we packed up the car and left for the cabin, a secluded lake house we rented every summer. The kids were excited, chatting endlessly about fishing and hiking, oblivious to the silent war being waged between their parents. Claire was cheerful, playing the role of a devoted wife and mother effortlessly. But every time she glanced at her phone, I knew she was checking for messages from him. She wouldn't get any. The night before, Noah had sent Nathan a message, posing as Claire, breaking things off. A simple text. "We need to stop this. I can't do this anymore. Don't contact me again." Then we blocked his number from her phone. She wouldn't notice right away. She was careful, but she wasn't suspicious. Not yet. By the time she realized Nathan wasn't responding, she'd already have bigger problems to deal with. That night, after the kids were asleep, Claire and I sat on the deck overlooking the lake, sipping wine. The reflection of the moon danced across the water, and for a moment it was almost easy to forget everything. Almost. "You seem relaxed," she said, leaning against me. "I am," I replied, and it was the truth, because I was in control. She sighed, swirling her wine glass. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us." I tilted my head slightly, pretending to be interested. "Yeah?" She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. I know things have been different. I know I've been distant. I said nothing. I want us to work, Lucian, she continued. I want to fix things. I turned to look at her, studying her face. Did she mean it? Was there a part of her that actually regretted what she had done? Or was she just saying what she thought I needed to hear? Either way, it didn't matter. I smiled. Me too. She let out a soft breath of relief and leaned her head against my shoulder. Lies. The next morning, while Claire was in the shower, I took her phone. She had a pattern. She always texted Nathan after our family trips, as if spending time with us was exhausting enough to remind her why she wanted him instead. I opened the messaging app, and sure enough, there was a draft waiting to be sent. I miss you. I need to see you. I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling something inside me tighten. Even now, after everything, she had no intention of stopping. I deleted the message. Then I typed a new one. Claire, we need to talk. Meet me at our usual place tonight. Nathan. And then I sent it. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Claire had no idea that she was walking straight into a trap. That evening, after we returned home, Claire barely waited until we unpacked before grabbing her keys. I have to meet up with Sophie, she said casually, naming one of her closest friends. She's been having a rough time. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Tell her I said hi. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out the door. The moment she was gone, I grabbed my keys and followed. I already knew where she was going. When I arrived at the hotel, I parked a few spots away and watched. Claire was standing outside, looking at her phone, waiting for a man who wasn't coming. I stepped out of the car and walked toward her. She was still checking her phone, frowning in confusion, when she finally looked up and saw me. Her entire body stiffened. Lucian? I kept walking, slowly, deliberately. She took a step back. What are you doing here? I stopped just a few feet away. I could ask you the same thing. She swallowed hard, glancing around as if searching for an escape. Sophie canceled last minute. I pulled out my phone and held up the messages. Her messages. Her face went pale. Looking for Nathan? I said, my voice calm, steady. He's not coming, but I am. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, Claire had nothing to say. The war was over. She just hadn't realized that she had already lost. Claire stood frozen. For a few seconds, she just stared at me, the glow of her phone screen still illuminating her pale face. The weight of realization was crashing down on her, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't in control. I could see it happening in real time. The way her eyes darted around, looking for an escape. The way her breathing turned shallow, her fingers gripping the edges of her phone so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She was scrambling, trying to think of something, anything, to explain this away. I let the silence stretch between us. The air was cold, but I barely felt it. Then, finally, Claire tried to speak. Lucian, I tilted my head slightly. You what, Claire? She hesitated. It's not what you think. I let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a scoff.
Really? Because I think you were standing outside a hotel, waiting for your lover, after lying to my face about meeting your friend. Tell me, Claire, what part of that am I misunderstanding? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was no way out of this. I could see the panic settling in. Her breath hitched, and she shook her head. Lucian, please. I can explain. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Then explain, Claire. She flinched. Not because I had raised my voice. I hadn't.
But because she knew I never spoke to her like this. Never with this kind of cold detachment. Claire wasn't used to this version of me. She had spent months, maybe longer, believing I would never change. That I would always be the trusting, devoted husband. The fool. She was wrong. I was going to break things off, she said suddenly, as if she had just found the excuse she was searching for. That's why I came here. I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. That's interesting, I said, holding up my phone. Because an hour ago you sent Nathan this message. I turned the screen toward her, showing her own words. I miss you. I need to see you. Her entire body stiffened. No. No. No, no. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She had always been careful. Always covered her tracks. Claire's mind was racing, her heart pounding against her ribs. She needed to come up with something, needed to regain control. Her voice cracked. She shook her head rapidly. That's not... I was confused. She was unraveling, and for the first time I felt nothing for her. No sympathy, no anger, just a quiet, chilling indifference. I pocketed my phone. You've already lost, Claire, I said simply. You just don't know it yet. Her lips parted, and for a second I thought she was going to break down. But then something in her shifted. The panic in her eyes turned into something else. Desperation.
Lucian,
she whispered, stepping closer.
Please, I made a mistake. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Her face crumpled. You still love me, don't you? I didn't answer. Because at that moment, I realized something. I didn't. Not anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving Claire standing there, alone in the cold. She didn't follow me. Maybe she knew it was pointless. Maybe she was too stunned to move. I didn't care. As I drove home, my mind was calm. The storm that had been brewing inside me for weeks had finally settled. The war was over, and I had won. When Claire came home later that night, her face was streaked with tears. She had been crying. Maybe on the drive home, maybe in the parking lot of the hotel where she had just been humiliated. But the first thing she did when she got inside was grab her phone. I knew what she was doing before she even unlocked it. She was trying to reach Nathan. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing message after message. No response. She dialed his number, pressed call, straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. Nothing. She let out a ragged breath, panic creeping back into her chest. Nathan was supposed to be her backup plan, her safety net. But now, she had no one. I sat on the couch watching her. I had been waiting for this moment. She finally noticed me. We need to talk, I said. Her breath hitched. Lucian. I gestured toward the chair across from me. Sit. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself onto the chair. I pulled out the folder. I know about Nathan. I know about the hotel, the dinners, the money you took from our account to pay for your little dates. I flipped through the papers, laying out the evidence one by one. I have the receipts, the bank statements, the photos. I have everything, Claire. She stared at the documents, her face draining of all color. I leaned forward. So now, you have two choices. Her eyes snapped up to mine. You can sign the divorce papers, I said, my voice as steady as ever.
Or we can take this to court, and I will make sure you lose everything. She let out a shaky breath. Lucian, please. We can fix this. I tilted my head. Fix this? I repeated, as if the idea was so absurd that I needed to make sure I heard her correctly. I'll stop seeing him, she rushed out. I swear, I was confused, but I love you, Lucian. I love our family. I don't want to lose you. I let out a slow exhale, studying her. You don't love me, Claire, I said, my voice calm. You love the security I give you. You love the life I built for you. And now that you're about to lose it, you suddenly want to fix things? Her lip trembled. No, that's not... I cut her off. You were never planning to stop, I said, nodding toward her phone. You texted him today, Claire. After a weekend with our family. After looking me in the eye and telling me you wanted to fix things. Her hands curled into fists in her lap. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I gave her a small, almost pitying smile. You already did. Then I slid the divorce papers across the table. Her eyes flickered down to them, then back up at me. You already had these, she realized, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. For how long? I met her gaze. Long enough. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Lucian, please. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the months of deception. I felt nothing. Sign the papers, Claire, I said. She hesitated. So I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. Or don't, I said, and watch me take everything from you. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen, and she signed. Claire signed the divorce papers, but she didn't move. She just sat there, staring at the pages in front of her, the pen still clutched in her trembling fingers. Her breathing was shallow, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw something in her eyes that had never been there before. Defeat. Not guilt. Not remorse. Just pure, unfiltered defeat. A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she lifted her head, her voice barely above a whisper. Is this really it? I tilted my head slightly. Did you think there was another option? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Maybe, even after everything, she had still held on to some delusion that I would forgive her, that I would let this slide like some fool blinded by love. But I wasn't that man anymore. She had killed him the moment she chose to betray me. I reached forward, grabbed the papers, and neatly stacked them. I'll have my lawyer finalize everything. Claire swallowed hard. Lucian. I stood up. Pack your things. You're leaving. Her eyes widened. What? Now? Yes. Panic flickered across her face. But where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. She let out a shaky breath, looking around the house, as if seeing it differently for the first time. This was no longer her home. She had lost that privilege the moment she made her choice. She didn't argue. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she had a dozen things she wanted to scream at me. But she didn't. She just nodded numbly, pushing herself up from the chair. Her movements were sluggish, like every ounce of energy had been drained from her. As she walked past me, her shoulder barely brushed against mine. It felt like a ghost of what we once were, two strangers occupying the same space, connected only by memories that no longer mattered. She moved like someone who had nowhere to go, because she didn't. Nathan wasn't answering her calls. Her carefully constructed safety net had unraveled right in front of her, thread by thread, until she had nothing left to hold on to. I followed her down the hall, watching as she grabbed a suitcase and started packing. She was slow, methodical, like she was stalling. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. Don't take too long. She flinched slightly at the coldness in my voice. She zipped up the suitcase and turned to face me. Can I at least say goodbye to the kids? I didn't answer immediately. I could have said no, could have told her she didn't deserve even that much, but I wasn't heartless. They're asleep, I said. You can see them in the morning before you go. She exhaled, nodding weakly. Okay. Then she hesitated. Lucian. I arched a brow. What? Her lips trembled slightly, and for a moment,
She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a final plea for mercy. But whatever it was, she swallowed it down. She just shook her head. Nothing. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked past me, and I let her go. That night, I stood by the bedroom window, staring at the empty driveway. Claire was gone. It should have felt like closure, like victory, but all I felt was exhaustion, not regret, not sorrow, just an overwhelming sense of fatigue. This war had lasted too long, drained too much from me. And now, it was finally over. I glanced over my shoulder, looking at the empty side of the bed. 12 years. 12 years of my life spent loving a woman who, in the end, didn't love me back. I didn't miss her. Not really. I just missed what I thought we had. And maybe that was the worst part. The next morning, Claire kept her word. She sat at the breakfast table with Lily and Ethan, pretending like everything was fine, even though her puffy eyes told another story. The kids didn't know yet. We had agreed, I had decided, that I would be the one to explain everything to them when the time was right, when they could understand. But Claire knew this was goodbye. When she finally stood up, she turned to them, forcing a smile. I have to go now, okay? Ethan frowned. Where? Claire hesitated. Just somewhere else. Lily narrowed her eyes, her little hands curling into fists. You're leaving? Claire's smile wavered. Just for a little while. Lily didn't believe her. I could see it in her eyes. The same sharp intuition that had told me something was wrong long before I had proof. Claire knelt down, reaching for her, but Lily pulled back. Why? Claire swallowed hard, glancing at me, almost pleading. I said nothing. This was her burden to bear. Finally, she whispered, I love you both so much, okay? Ethan, too young to fully understand, nodded hesitantly. But Lily just stared at her mother with something dangerously close to disappointment. And Claire felt it. I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped, the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed back tears. But this was the price she had to pay. She kissed Ethan's forehead, then hesitated before reaching for Lily again. Lily didn't move, didn't step forward. Claire exhaled shakily and dropped her hand. Then, without another word, she walked out the door. And this time, she didn't look back. The house was quiet after she left. Too quiet. Ethan ran off to play, but Lily stayed behind, staring at the door with furrowed brows. I sat down at the table next to her. She turned to me, voice small. She's not coming back, is she? I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. Not in the way she used to, sweetheart. Lily's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, to my surprise, she simply nodded. She didn't cry, didn't ask for more. She just understood. And somehow, that hurt more than anything. That night, I sat alone on the porch, staring up at the sky. The weight of everything finally settled on me. I had won. I had taken back control. I had protected my children, my home, my dignity. And yet, for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not sadness, not regret, just emptiness. Like I had spent so long fighting this battle that I had forgotten what life was supposed to feel like without it. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would start over. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The first morning without Claire felt different. Not painful, not freeing, just different. The house was quieter, but not in the way it had been before, when the silence was suffocating, filled with secrets and unspoken resentment.
This was a different kind of quiet. A stillness that came with change. I woke up before dawn, a habit I had developed over the past few months, when sleep had become a luxury I could rarely afford. But today, as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, there was no weight pressing against my chest, no dread curling in my stomach. Just emptiness. I exhaled and sat up, running a hand through my hair. The other side of the bed was cold. I didn't miss her. Not Claire. I missed the life I thought we had. The illusion of stability. The comfort of routine. But that life had never been real. And now, it was time to build something new. By the time the sun rose, I was already in the kitchen, making breakfast for the kids. Lily walked in first, still in her pajamas, her blonde hair a tangled mess from sleep. She blinked at me, rubbing her eyes. "You're up early," she mumbled. I smiled. "So are you." She yawned, pulling out a chair and sitting at the kitchen table. "Couldn't sleep." I understood that all too well. Ethan followed a few minutes later, still clutching his stuffed dinosaur. He climbed into his seat, yawning. "Where's Mommy?" The question hit harder than I expected, but I didn't let it show. Lily glanced at me, waiting for my answer. I set a plate of eggs in front of Ethan and sat down across from them. "Mommy had to go away for a little while," I said carefully. "But you'll still see her." Ethan frowned, poking at his food. "Is she coming back?" I hesitated. "Not to live here." His little brows furrowed. "Why?" Lily let out a quiet sigh. "Because she lied." Ethan turned to his sister. "About what?" Lily didn't answer. She just picked up her fork and started eating. Ethan looked back at me, clearly confused but too sleepy to push further. I reached across the table, squeezing his small hand. "Mommy loves you. That's never going to change." He nodded slowly, still not fully understanding. But Lily did. She wasn't looking at me, just staring at her plate, her lips pressed together in thought. She understood more than I had ever given her credit for. After breakfast, I dropped the kids off at school. The drive back home felt strange. For so long, I had been living in survival mode, always bracing for the next fight, the next revelation, the next betrayal. Now there was nothing left to fight. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. It looked the same as it always had, but it didn't feel the same. For the first time in a long time, it was mine. I walked inside, shutting the door behind me. The air smelled like coffee and fresh laundry. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I had spent so much time in this house feeling trapped. But now, it felt like a blank slate, a fresh start. By noon, I found myself in my office, sifting through emails, getting back to work. The normalcy of it all was strange. A week ago, my life had revolved around catching Claire in her lies, preparing for the inevitable fallout. Now, I was staring at spreadsheets and investor reports like nothing had happened, like my entire world hadn't just changed. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. Noah. I picked up. "Yeah? Just checking in," he said casually. "How's the first day of freedom?" I let out a short laugh. "Weird," he chuckled. "Figured as much." There was a brief pause before he added, "She signed, huh?" "She signed." Another pause. "How's she handling it?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know, and I don't care." Noah hummed thoughtfully. "Yeah, you do." I didn't argue. Because he was right. As much as I told myself Claire didn't matter anymore, as much as I wanted to believe I had shut that door completely, some small part of me still wondered what she was doing. If she was okay. If she regretted it. I sighed. "She's gone, Noah. That's all that matters." Fair enough, he said. Listen, I know you've got a lot to sort through, but don't let this shit consume you. You've got a life to live, man. I know. Good. Then start living it. The call ended, leaving me alone in the quiet house. For a long moment, I just sat there. Then, slowly, I exhaled. Noah was right. It was time to start living again. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I stood in the doorway of my office, staring at my laptop. I had work to do, emails to answer, clients to follow up with. But instead of sitting down at my desk, I grabbed a notepad and a pen. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank page for a moment. Then, slowly, I started writing. Not a business plan, not a financial report, just thoughts. Things I hadn't let myself process. Things I had buried under the weight of survival. I wrote about Claire, about the anger, the betrayal, the emptiness she left behind. I wrote about the kids, about the way Lily saw right through the lies, about the way Ethan still didn't fully understand. I wrote about myself, about the man I had been, about the man I wanted to become. And by the time I set the pen down, something in my chest felt lighter. Then, my phone buzzed. Claire. I stared at the screen, reading her message. Can we talk? For a brief second, I almost considered responding, but then I pressed delete. And just like that, she was gone. For good. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. Tomorrow, I would keep moving forward. And this time, I wouldn't be looking back. The days turned into weeks, and for the first time in years, life felt manageable. Not perfect, not even necessarily happy, but manageable. There were no more late nights spent wondering where Claire was. No more tension-filled mornings, pretending everything was fine for the kids. No more lies, no more half-hearted apologies, no more pretending.
It was just me, Lily, and Ethan. And somehow, that was enough. I started settling into a new routine. Mornings were spent getting the kids ready for school, packing lunches, braiding Lily's hair, reminding Ethan, for the 100th time, to wear matching socks. Work was steady. The company hadn't fallen apart while I was dealing with my personal life, but I hadn't exactly been present either. Now, I was slowly regaining control, diving back into meetings, catching up on neglected projects. Evenings were quiet, sometimes peaceful, sometimes lonely. But the loneliness was different now. Before, I had felt lonely inside my own marriage, a hollow, aching kind of loneliness that came from being with the wrong person. Now, I was alone, but at least it was real. One Friday evening, I was sitting in the living room, watching a movie with the kids, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Claire. I stared at her name for a moment. A few months ago, seeing her name would have sent my stomach twisting into knots. I would have grabbed the phone, desperate for an answer, for some kind of closure. But now all I felt was nothing. Lily noticed. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at the phone for a moment before looking up at me. "Aren't you gonna answer?" she asked. I shook my head. "No." Lily studied me, as if trying to figure something out. "She keeps calling." She wasn't wrong. Since the divorce was finalized, Claire had reached out several times. Texts, missed calls, even an email once. She never said much, just vague, empty words. "Can we talk? I just want to explain. I miss the kids." I had read the first few messages, but then one day, I stopped. I didn't block her. I didn't respond. I just let her messages sit there, unanswered, until they stopped meaning anything at all. "She doesn't get to do that," I told Lily gently. "Not anymore." Lily considered that for a moment, then nodded. And that was the end of it. I picked up the remote, unpaused the movie, and we moved on.
A few days later, I ran into Noah at a coffee shop downtown. He smirked when he saw me. Well, look who's actually stepping outside his house. I rolled my eyes, handing the barista my order. I've been busy. Uh-huh. He leaned against the counter. Still ignoring your ex-wife? I sighed. I'm not ignoring her. I'm just choosing not to engage. Same thing. I shrugged. Then yeah, I'm ignoring her. Noah chuckled. Good. She doesn't deserve a damn second more of your time. The barista handed me my coffee, and I took a sip before glancing at him. You say that like you know something. He raised an eyebrow. Maybe I do. I frowned. Noah. He sighed, crossing his arms. All right, fine. Look, I wasn't going to tell you because it's not your problem anymore, but since you're already ignoring her. He paused, then smirked. Which, by the way, I fully support. Noah. He held up his hands in surrender. Okay. Claire's been struggling. Apparently, Nathan didn't exactly stick around after everything blew up. I wasn't surprised. Nathan had never been in this for the long run. He got what he wanted, an affair, excitement, the thrill of sneaking around. But now that everything was out in the open, of course, he ran. Noah continued. She's been trying to get in touch with people, some mutual friends, some of your business contacts, even her old boss. Looks like she's realizing just how much she lost. I took another sip of my coffee, letting that sink in. Then I shrugged. That's not my problem. Noah studied me, waiting for some kind of reaction. Maybe he expected me to feel pity or satisfaction. But all I felt was nothing. And that was when I knew. I had really, truly moved on. That weekend, I took the kids to a fall festival outside the city. It was the kind of thing we never really did when Claire was around. She always had an excuse. Too busy, too tired, not interested. But today, as Ethan ran ahead to check out the pumpkin patch and Lily dragged me toward the caramel apples, I realized something. This was what real happiness looked like. Not forced, not complicated, just simple moments. Laughing as Ethan got his face painted like a tiger, holding Lily's coat as she ran to join a group of kids in a hayride. For the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't carrying the weight of a broken marriage anymore. I wasn't constantly second-guessing myself. I wasn't living in the past. I was here. Really, truly here. And it felt damn good. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat outside on the porch, staring up at the sky. For the first time in forever, I wasn't thinking about Claire. I wasn't wondering what she was doing, who she was with, whether she regretted her choices. I didn't care anymore. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I was happy. And she wasn't a part of that happiness. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts. Then, on impulse, I sent a text. Me, you still up? A few seconds later, the response came. Noah, always. What's up? I hesitated, then typed. Me, you still think I should start dating again? There was a pause. Then, Noah, hell yes. I chuckled, shaking my head. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to start thinking about what came next. Not just surviving, not just existing, but actually living. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. I didn't jump back into dating right away. It wasn't like flipping a switch. After 12 years of marriage, after everything, I wasn't just going to wake up one day, throw on a suit, and start looking for someone new. I needed time. Time to figure out who I was without Claire. Time to be a father. Time to enjoy the peace I had fought so damn hard to get. But the thought of it, the idea of moving forward, of meeting someone who wasn't her, for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. A week after that late-night conversation with Noah, I found myself saying yes to things I would have avoided before. An impromptu lunch with colleagues, a weekend getaway with the kids, a quiet dinner alone at a nice restaurant, not as a way to escape, but as a way to enjoy my own company. For the first time in years, my life wasn't about surviving. It was about living. One afternoon, while clearing out old files in my office, I found something unexpected. An old notebook. The leather cover was worn, the pages slightly yellowed. I flipped it open, scanning my own handwriting. Plans, ideas, goals I had once set for myself. Most of them had been abandoned somewhere along the way. I let out a slow breath, running my fingers over the ink. There was a time when I had dreams beyond just maintaining a marriage. When I had ambitions that weren't tied to keeping someone else happy. And for the first time, in a long, long time, I wanted those things again. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat outside on the porch, staring up at the sky. The weight that had once pressed against my chest was gone. I wasn't thinking about Claire. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what came next. Because for the first time in years, the future didn't scare me. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my office, sorting through emails, when a familiar name popped up on my screen. Olivia Carter, our divorce attorney. I frowned and clicked on the message. Subject: potential referral. Lucian, hope you're doing well. I know this might be a little unexpected, but I have a friend who could use some financial advice regarding a business expansion. She's in need of someone reliable, and I immediately thought of you. If you're interested, let me know, and I'll put you two in touch. Best, Olivia. I leaned back in my chair, rereading the email. Olivia wasn't just my attorney. Over the course of the divorce, she had become something close to a friend. She had seen me at my lowest, at my angriest, and at my most exhausted. If she was reaching out, she probably thought this was worth my time.
Still, I hesitated before replying, not because I wasn't interested, but because I knew what Noah would say the second he found out. That evening, over drinks, I casually mentioned the email. Noah, predictably, did not react casually.
She's setting you up,
he said immediately. I sighed, taking a sip of my whiskey. It's a business referral, he smirked. Sure it is. I shook my head, but I couldn't help the small smirk tugging at my lips. Maybe Noah was wrong, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't. 2 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop waiting for my potential new client. I had kept the meeting casual, no suit, no tie, just a button-down and jeans. It was a consultation, not a corporate merger. I glanced at my watch just as the door swung open, and then I saw her. She was unexpected. Dark hair, loose waves framing a face that was both confident and warm. Sharp brown eyes that scanned the room with quiet intelligence. A simple, elegant outfit, blazer, fitted jeans, ankle boots, that somehow made her stand out more than any designer dress ever could. She spotted me, smiled, and walked over. "You must be Lucian." Her voice was smooth, self-assured. I stood and extended a hand. "That's me." She shook it firmly. "I'm Emilia." Emilia? The name fit her. We sat down, and before I could even ask, she flagged down a barista and ordered a black coffee. No hesitation. I liked that. "So," she said, turning back to me, "Olivia speaks highly of you." I smirked. "I'll have to thank her for the good PR." Emilia chuckled. "Well, let's see if you live up to the reputation." There was something about her, something easy, something real, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was interested. 1 year later. The sound of laughter echoed through the house.
Ethan was chasing Lily around the living room, both of them giggling wildly as I stood in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. A second later, arms wrapped around my waist from behind. Amelia. She rested her chin on my shoulder, smiling. They're full of energy today.
I turned, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. They always are. A year ago, I never would have imagined this. Not just being in a relationship again, but feeling at peace, feeling genuinely happy. The scars of the past were still there. They probably always would be. But they didn't define me anymore. I had rebuilt. I had moved on. And I had found something real, something worth holding on to. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Amelia and I sat outside on the porch, watching the stars. She glanced over at me, tilting her head. Penny for your thoughts? I exhaled slowly, letting my gaze drift upward. A year ago, I murmured, I was sitting out here alone, wondering if I'd ever feel normal again. She was quiet for a moment, then reached over, lacing her fingers through mine. And now? She asked softly. I looked at her, and I smiled. Now, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.